We've been told Egyptian slaves hauled temple stones using brute force and ramps. The evidence says something else entirely happened. For nearly 2 centuries, Egyptologists have agreed on the basics. Thousands of workers, wooden sledges, ramps of mud, brick, and sand. The Great Pyramid of Khufu required an estimated 2–3 million limestone blocks, each one weighing as much as a loaded truck. The accepted model is simple: organize labor, apply force, move stone. It's been taught in universities and repeated in documentaries without serious challenge. But start asking the specifics, and the model fractures. In 2014, a team of researchers examined quarry marks at Aswan, where the hardest granite was extracted. The marks tell a story. They show something the textbooks had mostly ignored. The quarrymen weren't moving entire blocks at once. They were splitting them in stages, using a technique so precise it required deep knowledge of stone grain and fracture patterns. The accepted narrative also assumes a centralized, militaristic system, overseers with whips, gangs of conscripted labor working in brutal conditions. It's a story that fits a certain image of ancient Egypt: authoritarian, monolithic, cruel. But the archaeological record doesn't support it. Worker villages excavated near temple sites show something different: organized communities, bakeries, medical facilities, evidence of deliberate care. The graffiti found inside the pyramids, scrawled by work gangs themselves, reveals another crack in the old story. These men had names, they had crew identities: the South Gang, the Friends of Menkora. They marked their work with pride, not the marks of enslaved people. They were skilled laborers, not prisoners. Now consider the logistics. Moving a 2-ton block from Aswan to Giza is roughly 500 miles. If you're using the standard ramp and sledge model, the energy cost becomes almost impossible. The friction alone would require a crew of 100 people per block, or an absurdly long ramp. The math doesn't hold. Something else was happening. The Nile was the answer. Quarrymen didn't move most stones by land at all. They moved them by water. During flood season, the river rose dramatically. Blocks were loaded onto wooden barges and floated downstream. This wasn't a minor detail. It was the central system. The quarries were positioned near the river for exactly this reason. Recent studies of the Tura limestone quarries, the source of the white casing stones that once covered the pyramids, show something even more telling. The blocks were extracted in a sequence. They weren't random. They followed the natural bedding planes of the stone. The quarrymen understood geology. They weren't just hacking away. They were reading the rock. The tools themselves were revelatory: copper chisels, stone pounders, wooden wedges. They weren't crude. Copper, when worked correctly, is harder than the limestone it was cutting. The quarrymen had perfected a technique: strike the chisel at precise angles, follow the grain, let the stone do the work. It's almost surgical. The real story begins to emerge around 2600 BCE, during the reign of Khufu. The pyramid construction wasn't a sudden, impossible feat. It was the culmination of generations of refining quarrying technique. His father, Sneferu, had overseen massive stone projects. The knowledge accumulated, the methods improved. By the time Khufu ordered the Great Pyramid, the system was mature. The quarrymen themselves were seasonal workers. They came during the inundation, the flood months, when farming was impossible. They earned wages, paid in grain and bread. They had contracts, recorded on ostraca, pottery shards used like notebooks. The system was bureaucratic, not brutal. It was economic. Skeletal evidence from worker cemeteries near temple sites tells another detail. These people weren't starved. They weren't worked to death in the numbers the old narrative suggested. They had injuries. Yes, quarrying was dangerous. Crushed fingers, broken bones, but they recovered. They were treated. Paleopathologists found evidence of medical intervention. The ramps, when they existed, were likely much smaller and more sophisticated than the massive earthen structures imagined in old reconstructions. Some may have been spiral, wrapping around the pyramid itself. Others were probably temporary, built section by section and dismantled as work progressed. The evidence for massive permanent ramps is actually quite thin. Here's what the real system looked like: quarrymen with expertise in stone fracture, a transport network built around seasonal rivers, Organized work gangs with identity and pride, wage-earning laborers, not slaves, medical care and food security, a bureaucracy that tracked workers by name. It's less dramatic than the whip and pyramid mythology, but it's far more impressive. The implications matter. This wasn't a society that succeeded through raw brutality. It succeeded through knowledge, through understanding material, through logistics, through organized labor treated with dignity. The Quarrymen weren't nameless slaves. They were craftspeople, professionals, men who developed skills across their lifetimes and passed them to the next generation. This reframing changes how we understand ancient Egypt itself, not as a civilization built on oppression, but as one built on technical mastery and organized efficiency. The pyramids didn't rise from suffering. They rose from expertise, from people who understood their craft so deeply that moving mountains became a solvable problem. The Quarrymen left almost no written records of their own, no journals, no memoirs. History wrote them out, replacing their names and skill with a generic image of enslaved masses. But they wrote their names inside the pyramids. They left their marks on stone. They left their tools in quarries. They left themselves behind in the work. The accepted explanation was simple. It fit the narrative of the age. But simplicity isn't accuracy. The real story of knowledge, expertise, organized labor, and seasonal work is more complex. It's also more human. These weren't slaves building monuments to tyrants. They were professionals building monuments to permanence. That distinction matters. Subscribe. There's a new story about the people history forgot every week.